We actually just passed a traffic calming program on Bradford Hills Drive. So with this program, with the Bradford Hills Drive effort and some other efforts we're doing, we're really hoping to cut cut down on cut through traffic and congestion in the area. And I think this is a great opportunity to do that and also get more police resources out in District 4. So it's good to see everybody.
Yeah, appreciate you doing that. And you may have heard, sorry you were interrupted there by our little voice recording there that was notifying everyone that this meeting is being recorded. And we like to do that so that if you have neighbors that weren't able to be with us tonight, this meeting will be available to them via the YouTube site that Metro maintains specific to NDOT. And so that should show up here in the next few days. Again, you have access to that to share that link as needed. A couple other housekeeping items. You do all have the ability, I think, to unmute yourself. We don't mind if you do that at all. These are typically fairly small group meetings, which we like, and so we want to make your access and participation in this meeting as broad as it can be. So feel free to unmute yourself there and ask any questions or comments as we go along. If you're not doing that, we would ask that you keep muted. It tends to make for a better recording, let everybody hear a little bit better. There is also a chat feature here on this WebEx platform. So if you can find the little chat button, feel free to click that. If you'd rather just type a comment or question, I'll try to monitor that as we go along as well. This project is a little bit different than most of our traffic calming projects. We'll get into some of those details as we go tonight, but just in that vein, I want to introduce some folks with Metro Nashville Police Department who are with us, and I'll let them introduce themselves really as if they'd like to do that. But because, as Councilman said, this is a little bit different in that we might investigate more of a enforcement aspect to this project. We're very pleased to have our partners there at MNPD as well.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself. I am Captain Raymond Jones. I am the captain over the traffic division for the entire city of Nashville and Davidson County. The traffic division is comprised of multiple units. If you see a motorcycle officer on the street, that's a traffic component. All the fatal crashes in Davidson County are work through the traffic division. All the school crossing guards in Davidson County are worked through the traffic division. And aggressive driving, DUI, things of that nature are the ones that people are most familiar with. They all work through the traffic division. So I'm very happy to be here this evening.
Thank you, Captain Jones, for being here and for the work that you and your officers do. We appreciate it very much. You're probably at the same time one of the most popular and unpopular officers that we know.
100%
we love the work that you do.
Accurate.
We love the work that you do, but we don't want to deal with you individually. So thank you for being here. And again, thank you all if you've just joined on. Thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and start progressing through some slides. Three main things that we want to do here tonight is, first of all, give you an overview of this traffic calming initiative, in particular the role of participatory budgeting. That's kind of a mouthful, but that's what we're working here with tonight. Secondly, we'll show you a very preliminary concept for this project and what we think might make for a successful project here on Holt Road. And then lastly, leave you with some maybe more of a discussion than me providing information about where we go from here in the next steps. A little bit about participatory budgeting. If you're not familiar with this is an initiative that's been around for a couple of years here in Davidson County. And it is a chance for you as the local community and the local neighborhood to have more of a direct say in how budgets are spent. This process goes back some time. I'll show you that in just a second, with a committee that was put together, and it entertained projects, not just traffic calming, not even just transportation, but projects in a lot of different areas, parks and Just a number of different types of projects were entertained. It went to a more broad, really a countywide kind of an info, I would call it a ballot, but it was just an informal voting process that was put out on social media and other platforms that people could weigh in and give some direct input in that. There was also a participatory budgeting committee that was developed. I think someone from this neighborhood was involved. If you were and you want to speak to that, feel free to give us some more insight into that. All of that to say that we as NDOT and NDOT's consultants have not really been involved up to this point in those discussions and what all has gone through. So I can talk to you about traffic calming and how we typically do those projects, but this one is just a little bit different in that it has a different beginning, and some of the discussion that went on is probably a little bit different than our typical process. Here is a little bit of a snapshot on the time frame and the process that this project went through. This goes way back to the winter of 2023, and there's been a lot of history getting us up to this point. This project, as well as all the traffic calming projects, landed at NDOT back in the spring, and so we've been talking through it and meeting with, again, partners at MNPD, kind of thinking about what this might consist of. And now we're here to talk to you about it. And so, again, there's some history here. We haven't been involved firsthand with a lot of it, but this is where we are now. Now it is squarely in the hands of NDOT and MNPD. It is a funded project. There is a budget that has been established, but the details about how we spend that budget and so forth, I think, is what we're here to talk about with you all tonight. This is what that committee came up with. So there's a whole website and a lot of information at nashville.gov about this process and these projects specifically. And the one identified for Holt Road in a map form says this. It says that what was agreed to is that we would develop traffic calming measures on Holt Road to slow traffic and improve safety. That's pretty typical for most of our traffic calming projects. Specifically, it was mentioned that you all have seen some instances of late night drag racing. That's probably not news to you. You probably have experienced that. Again, this goes back some time. Whether that continues or not, I don't know. But in any event, there was some very unwelcome behavior, and again, that's pretty typical for what we see in most traffic calming projects. It went on to identify that these would be non-intrusive speed measures. Let me talk about what I mean by that. Most of the time when people engage the traffic calming program through NDOT, they apply into this process. We go through a prioritization process and select those projects. As Councilman mentioned, Bradford Hills was one of those, and we're working on that project now. And our bread and butter measure that we put in implementation is a speed cushion. You've probably seen these. They're little black, some people call them speed bumps. They kind of work that way, but they're much more gradual, and we bolt those in the road, and that tends to slow traffic down. That's most of the time what people think of when they think of traffic calming projects here in Nashville. We do have some limitations on where we can use those. Those are not rated for speeds that are higher than 30 miles an hour based on our posted speed limits, or traffic volumes greater than 5,000. 5,000 cars a day. Holt Road has both of those. The speed limit is posted higher than 30 miles an hour, and it also has well over 5,000 cars a day. It's more like 8,000 cars a day. And so back during that committee's deliberations on what would happen on Holt Road, it was made clear that speed cushions and that type of a device would not be used. What would be used is something more non-intrusive, which would be like radar feedback signs. It identified a targeted enforcement campaign. Didn't go into much more detail than that, but just said that there might be enforcement as part of this. And it did identify some enhanced pavement markings. That's the edge lines that you have on the street, or that double yellow solid line that you see down the street. Those were the things that were identified. The budget was about $50,000, and so that's the money that we've got to work with, and some of the things that we're considering as part of the project.
I thought the budget was 60,000.
I've seen both.
Okay.
I have a source. We've been given a sheet that was given to us from that committee that has 50. It is, you're correct. 60 is also identified on the on that interactive map. So we'll continue to try and clarify that. For now, we're kind of using the conservative amount just to make sure we don't go over, but there may be up to 60.
Sounds good.
This is a map that is available on NDOT's traffic calming website. It is a traffic calming tracker. Even though this project is going through participatory budgeting and you know those differences, we still wanted to show it on the traffic calming website and tracker so that you all can see how it interacts with other things that are being developed. As was mentioned elsewhere in District 4, we've got Bradford Hills. We've got some other things that are in the works, even closer than that to Holt Road. So in this slide, Holt Road is the green, kind of the pea green color that runs east to west along the middle of that slide. I know it's hard to see the labels here. That green color just indicates that it's a project that's in this stage. We're meeting with you all. We're in the design stage, and so that's what the color indicates. The purple lines that you see on some of those neighborhood streets coming into Holt Road just tell us that there has already been an application put in for traffic calming on those streets. They have not been selected. We're not moving forward with them, but just so you're aware, someone has applied in for traffic calming. Those continue to be in that prioritization process. We've collected data on all of those. They just haven't made their way up to the top of that list yet. And then you see a blue line down at the bottom. I believe that's on Redmond Lane where the new-ish traffic signal is. That one indicates that there has already been a traffic calming project applied for. It was selected. It has been designed. It has even been balloted and passed in the ballot process. It's now waiting for construction. So there will be traffic calming on Redmond leading into, at least from the Davidson County line.
Do we know what that program, what measures were taken or voted on in that program?
Yeah, I believe it's speed cushions, like our typical installation. That I can find out for sure, and we can even see some diagrams of that. Those design plans would be online still on the traffic calming website, so we can
just in the last day or so, they put white stripes on each side of it, and there's some sort of a going to the away from Holt. There's a plastic sort of rubber cushiony thing just on the one side, a short one, and that just happened today.
Okay, that's good to know. And so everyone knows for Bradford Hills Drive, they use speed cushions, bulb outs, which help reduce speed as well, and also radar detectors. So there's a multitude when they're going through different programs and they look at the street to figure out what solution would suit it best. There's multiple things they pull from. So there's quite a bit. There's a few other options aside from just speed cushions, but speed cushions are used quite a bit.
Yeah, very good. That's great information. Stuff that's happening every day. We don't always know, so appreciate that insight from the ground there. This map is also available, I think I mentioned, on their website. It's countywide. If you want to go in and zoom in and get a better feel for that, you're welcome to that. That's available to you anytime. So with that, a couple of tools that are in the toolkit that I will just define before we look at the concept for your street. And these fall into really three categories. Typically in our traffic calming project, we acknowledge MNPD's contributions to this in the form of enforcement, but we really don't have any tools that get to enforcement. NDOT does not have any enforcement capabilities. And so we acknowledge that's a big part of traffic calming. We understand that, but our tools are really limited to more of the education and especially the engineering component. I'm sorry, you couldn't see those, but there they are: education, enforcement, and engineering, the 3 E's. This is one that I mentioned that will we anticipate being a primary a primary part of this project is the radar feedback sign. You're seeing these come in more and more often around Davidson County, particularly on streets like this where we just have a traffic volume that exceeds what will be prudent for speed cushions and those things. We'll also use these sometimes to supplement a more traditional traffic calming project if there are steep hills or sharp curves that we don't think it's a good idea to put speed cushions on either. So you're starting to see more of these. Some before and after data has been collected. It shows really good results, especially in the short term, of about 6 or 7 miles an hour speed reduction. The jury's still out on how that effectiveness holds up over time, but we'll go to neighborhoods and some people swear by them and say it absolutely makes a difference. We love them. And you go to others and they're like, we've kind of gotten used to it. We see it, but anyway, so there's differences of opinion on effectiveness, but regardless, I think it really is a good reminder and an attention getter for people and how fast they are actually going.
Well, I think I'm sorry to cut in, but when you pair that with the enforcement side with MNPD, and then when you see an increased presence, behavior is going to change when they feel their speeds being monitored in different ways. So I think together those have a really strong effect.
I think you're right there, and that's not something we typically have on these projects. So I totally agree with that. I think that's a good insight. I also think this street is a little bit different than most. Most of the times we're dealing with much more neighborhood, very local streets. This one is a collector identified by Metro, which just means it's meant to get you somewhere. It connects from major arterials like Nolensville Road and brings that traffic into and out of neighborhoods. It serves a very important purpose. And with that, we often see traffic that doesn't travel on Holt Road every day. I used it the other night coming back from someplace, and it's rare that I am on Holt. When you have traffic that doesn't travel this every day and they see that feedback sign, I think you have a more effectiveness than if it's on a local neighborhood street where it's the same people traveling on it all the time. The other thing that we mentioned is pavement markings, and there's different things that we can do with pavement markings. One of the things that research really tells us that we know about is the impact that visually how the width of the road can be impacted by pavement markings. When a street appears to be very wide and have a lot of room, people tend to drive faster. That's particularly true on a street like yours, where I know the pavement is not all that wide, but you have really big setbacks here. Your houses are way back off the road. Beautiful country. It's almost like being in a rural area, and so there's that's really a nice setting, but it's also one that I think might encourage more higher speeds. So it's good that you have the stripes on the street now. We would certainly maintain those, and as I mentioned, one thought was to actually widen those. That's more from a visibility standpoint and a safety standpoint. I don't think you'll see an appreciable. I don't think it'll feel appreciably narrower to you. The stripes that are out there now are 4 inches wide, and so what is sometimes done from a safety standpoint is to widen those to a 6-inch wide stripe. So you might notice some difference there, but it's really just to kind of reinforce the safety aspect of that. As was mentioned, let me use this. One thing that was mentioned was another thing that can happen with pavement markings, and that is to do something called a bulb out or a chicane. Bulb outs in particular are more striping that's done at intersections, and it's typically done in places where you have really wide pavement, like you see here. You might have on street parking or something like that, and it helps to reinforce that slower speed by reducing the width that cars have to operate with. On a street like this, it's really easy to pull up to that stop sign, kind of keep cruising and turn at a higher rate of speed onto that main street. But if we can narrow that just a little bit, particularly if there is on-street parking, that can be effective. We don't have a lot of width like that to work with on Holt Road, so we've not really shown any bulb outs, but it was mentioned, and we'll continue to keep that in mind. And I want you all to keep that in mind if you can think of ways that we could do that.
Yeah, this is one of the solutions that will be implemented for Bradford Hills that the residents voted on. So that when I said bulb out, this is one of the pieces that will be installed on that street.
Right. Yeah. Chicanes is another one. We rarely get into it. It's very specialized. It kind of creates a meandering effect for traffic on the street, which can bring about slower speeds. It's really helpful if it's done in concert with on-street park, and probably not one that's very applicable here on Holt. So those are the main things that we're dealing with here. We've got a few other tools that, in more neighborhood settings and more urban settings, we can deploy, but those are probably the most common ones that we are using here in Nashville on a street like Holt Road. And so this is a very basic schematic for our thoughts on what the engineering solution might look like on Holt Road. So looking at the little stop sign symbol that you see on the left-hand side of the slide, that's the end of Holt at Edmondson Pike. And then, of course, that goes all the way to the right-hand side of the picture where you've got Nolensville Road there at the traffic signal. I know there's a lot of construction happening there and all. It's pretty limited to that intersection. I don't think anything that we do is going to impact their construction or vice versa with the TDOT widening project there. And so what we have suggested is that this street is long enough. This segment of road is probably one of the longer ones that we've done, and it might warrant two different radar feedback signs as you go from one end of that road to the other. So you see 4 total. That would be 2 in each direction, and we've tried to space those so that you have an opportunity to get up to speed before you see that feedback sign, but at the same time, not so far into the street that you've already covered a good deal of that distance before being reminded that the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. The only other thing I would say about that is 2 of those signs we would suggest might need to be in new locations. 2 of those signs we could probably replace the existing speed limit sign that's there. In the upper left-hand corner, you see an image, and I don't want you to think that we're talking about changing the speed limit to 25 miles an hour. That's just kind of an example of what they look like. But it is a regulatory speed limit sign on the top, and then the feedback part, the dynamic part of that sign on the bottom, just like you see there. Those are solar powered, and so where we have suggested those would be now is of course subject to going out in the field, looking at that. Tree cover becomes a big part of this. We want to make sure that these stay working and visible, and so we need to locate those where we have good south facing sun for a good part of the day there, so we can always adjust that as needed. We did also identify there the edge line and the center line striping on the entire length of the road, so you see that called out. And again, this is an initial concept that we'd like to have your feedback on and see what you think about that. If you have noticed particular speeding or other driving behavior issues at specific parts along the places along the route, we'd love to know that. I've talked a lot, so anything that you want to let us know and give us your feedback on this sketch, we'd like to invite you to do that.
Hello, Jeff. Councilman, can you hear me? This is Sean Doyle.
We can hear you, Mr. Doyle. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you, and you as well, Councilman Mike, Councilman Cortez. I believe it was the chief of NPD that is joining us. Anyway, we thank you for these efforts. We've lived on Holt Road close to 20 years, 17, 18 years. and it, as you know, has just gotten progressively worse, especially in the last 5 years, both with the traffic volume and with the constant speeding, particularly at night. I personally like these measures. I know, speaking from experience myself, when I see some of these similar measures with the speed signs and your speed limit, et cetera, I pay attention to them. For one thing, I always think that Metro Police may be close by, but it also just makes me aware. So I personally like these measures. You did answer one of the questions I had, and that was, what has been your success with these similar measures in other places? And you kind of addressed that with one of your slides. One question I do have is, when was the last NDOT traffic study, volume study done? I don't recall one being done anytime in the last 5 years.
Yeah, so again, this is where our process differs a little bit from a typical traffic calming project. Typically, what happens is someone applies in. We have two traffic calming applications per year. They will apply in during one of those windows, and we take all of those, and we're now up to, we didn't share this, we do in most meetings, but we're now up to over 400, close to 500, over 400 or close to 500 applications throughout the county. So you all are not alone in some of these issues. And what we do with all of those is we'll go out and we will do a traffic study. We'll actually count the cars on the street and measure the speed based on those. When you see those tubes on the road that you
Right.
go over, that's what it's collecting. We did not do that for these because this went through the participatory budgeting process. It was kind of decided independently of some of that data that we needed to look at some of these issues that came from somewhere else. So we don't have speed and volume data that we collected. When I showed you a minute ago that there's 8,000 cars a day on that, that's actually a TDOT count. TDOT in all 95 counties of Tennessee collect volume data usually once a year. It's usually done in the spring. And so I actually have historic data going back. They would have counted this probably within 2024. The volume that I listed is probably still the 2023 data, but they are counting that every year.
Okay, I know. And we fully anticipate the volume honestly increasing as the project, Nolensville Road widening project, goes along. That may or may not be true, only time will tell. One of the other questions, well, that answers that one as far as the traffic volume goes, but what is your experience with this helping with specifically the late night super speeding that's going on? I mean, I would have to think they just would tend to ignore it, absent, law enforcement being there somewhere from time to time. And I know the size of law enforcement is challenged right now, but that would obviously seem to be the most effective if there's more of a police presence. But absent that, what is kind of the success of these speeding measures, especially as it relates to late night drag racing type of things?
Yeah, no, I think your observations are probably correct. We usually send a word of caution to folks that no traffic calming is 100% foolproof. There are fools out there that will do a lot of crazy things, no matter what you put in the street. And so, including they will leave the street to drive around our speed cushions. So we've got to go to great lengths to kind of protect those things.
Right.
We know there's some crazy behavior out there. I think that's true with these signs as well. A lot of people will look at that and say, oh, wow, I see that I am going too fast. I will correct and slow down just out of safety or consideration for you folks who live there or whatever. Some people will not. And so we are aware of that. There is a mechanism here, even on these, that, there's a theory that, if you post people's speed, there will be a competition to see how high you can get it. And so there is there's a mechanism to actually blank those out above a certain, say the speed limit's 40 and you want to tell them you're going up to 50 but no more, you can actually stop it at 50 and it just goes blank. Some of them have like a strobe light on it that kind of flashes to get folks' attention, kind of simulate, police lights or warning lights. So there's different minor aspects to these things, but yeah, we're aware of that. Specific to nighttime, I don't think there's probably much different than daytime. You did mention that, and I think that's interesting. And maybe one thing that we can look at is if there are places in curves or some specific things where we have noted some crash patterns that might be nighttime related, we can potentially look at lighting. I don't know if there are street lights on the street now or not.
There's not.
No, there's not. Okay. Well, then that's probably not something we're going to be able to add. I was going to say there is an effort now to retrofit a lot of our street lights to an LED street lamp. But
there's a couple.
I think you're clear now if you want to talk.
If Captain Jones, I'd like to talk about the targeted enforcement because I think that's a really interesting piece of this, what that looks like and what we need to do to really utilize that and bolster that as much as possible.
That's where I was going next, Councilman. Exactly.
Absolutely. Before I talk about that, the problems at night, what's a good time frame where the problems are the worst, would you say?
Fair question, and it's generally after 10. For better or worse, I'm kind of a night owl, but you can hear it generally after 10 and all the way up till 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. All right.
But I would say for the most part, it's kind of in a 10 to 2. It's worse on weekends, as you can expect, but.
Okay. All right. Well, there's a couple of things. First, so this area, I'm sure most of you all know, is under the Midtown Hills precinct. And I work closely with Commander Richmond on this, and I'll be sure and share these notes with him, especially those times we're having issues. So as far as the traffic division goes, so we've been out there, not this week, but the previous 3 weeks before this week, and we made 23 stops and got and wrote tickets for everybody. But I'm glad I know that's mostly early morning into the late evening, not that super late time frame.
Right.
And I'm gonna communicate with Commander Richmond and see if we can put a plan together to enforce that. So as far as our presence is, so just in Midtown Hills alone, the traffic division has over 40 locations, just like Holt Road, that are requesting enforcement. So our time is spread out, and we like to put areas like Holt on a rotation, so where everyone gets enforcement equally. But what we have done during this summer, we've kind of doubled up on that just to be in the neighborhoods more, because I know there is a need for us to be there. Traditionally, we had resources out doing school zone enforcement. Well, since school is out, we doubled up those resources in the neighborhood. So when we run a street racer initiative, we're running one this Saturday, and that typically runs from like 7 at night to 2 in the morning. And I have them spend some time on Holt Road as well. The street racer initiative has been very successful so far. We've had over 70 arrests and a number of charges, but that effort is continuing. So that's another thing we can do. And I'm going to get with Commander Richmond and see if we can put a plan together for his evening shift to get out there and do some enforcement. And I agree 100% that the engineering is a component, but the enforcement is a major component. Because when everyone sees blue lights, when everyone sees the police pull individuals over, everyone slows down and checks their
Mhm.
speedometer.
I
I do
know I
that in
do.
my I do that in my personal car, and I'm the police.
Right.
100%. So that's something we can do. But I think the best thing you all, the community is doing it right now, communicating the times, the specifics, so we can add it to the list and we can have a history, so we all know where the resources need to be. A
Yeah, and
lot of
this,
times,
I can be
go
a
ahead.
conduit for that information. So everybody on this call, and please tell your neighbors, if you see street racing, if you hear these things, let me know and just take a timestamp of it, because then I can send that in to Sergeant Gomez, to Captain Jones, and
Right.
it'll help us really narrow down and be more effective with the efforts. So please, when you hear things, whatever it is, if it's a gunshot, if it's kids shooting in the backyard, if it's people speeding, let me know, because I can pass that information along to MNPD and it can help us tremendously.
Will do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Doyle.
It does. Thank you very much. And I would add that, typically the way it goes down is you can hear them on Nolensville Road, first of all.
Absolutely.
They'll be coming down Nolensville Road first, and then they'll turn on to Holt, and they'll reach their, as you can imagine, I live on this graph, I live on that, right where that R is on the far right, on the east end. So you can imagine where the high speeds, that's where they start accelerating, and then they just gun it, they just gas it all the way down Holt Road, and then they slow down when they get towards Edmondson. So, if you were to put somebody right there, for example, at Redmond or Holt Hills,
Okay.
is where I think it would be most impactful. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely do that, and I'll pass that along. One thing I do want the community on the call to know from a safety standpoint, when I send officers out to do enforcement, we have to make sure we're in a good spot where we can safely pull people over, because
Yeah,
in
true.
years past and in some situations, we'll have people pulled over and there's no shoulder, and sometimes we create more issues than we fix, if that makes sense.
It does, and that's a great point. And that is what I see as one of the challenges on Holt Road is there really is not a shoulder for the length of it. So that obviously is, part of the logistics you all will have to just come up with your best plan with. But
I did
Questions?
see,
Yeah.
Raymond, this is
Go ahead.
Kelly Cupperly. I did see you or somebody on a motorcycle pulling people over, and you had them parked right there on Holt Hills Road, and there's a lot of room there, right? So when you pull off a Holt onto
yeah,
Holt Hills, there's plenty of room, and I saw you ticketing, maybe pulling people over, kind of one after the other. I think it was last week, so.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for sharing that.
But yes,
yeah,
it's dangerous. There's no shoulder, and people like to drag race. Like Sean was saying, after like once 10 o'clock, 10 to 11 kicks off, that's when Holt Road,
yeah. The
the
checker
it
flag
turns
goes.
into the speedway. Yes.
Yes, it's true.
Captain Jones, and I'm spitballing, so this may be a terrible idea. Would it be helpful if I reached out to some community members, and there were community members who had driveways that were accessible by Shearbrook Lane, by Holt Hills, by Edmondson? So if they were willing to have officers sit there, and then right after they would have a good pull-off spot for this program. Would something like that be helpful? And I don't even know if you can use private land, so that may be a terrible idea, but just thinking outside the box.
I get where you're going with that, and I like the idea if the homeowner is okay with us posting up in their driveway. But here is the challenge with that. If I'm posted up in your driveway and you live off Holt Hills, and I catch someone coming down Holt Road, if I have them on radar and they pass me, it's going to take me a while to catch up with them, and they're further down Holt Road than your
Okay,
driveway, if that makes sense.
100%. Yeah, I just spitballing, maybe a terrible idea. Just thought I'd throw it out.
Makes sense. Where are things stand with LPRs? have they ever been approved for anywhere? License plate readers?
The program was approved, but they're not in this year's budget, is my understanding.
Okay. I'm pretty sure they're used in Williamson County, and that's how they've got the cameras where they capture them and send people tickets. I think they do that in Williamson County, but I may not be 100% on that, but just a thought down the road.
Understood. One thing I can speak to a larger, like how this pieces together. So a lot of what we experience here, in addition to the drag racing, a lot of the congestion, as I'm sure everyone on this call can attest to, is out of county traffic. So you see a lot of Rutherford plates, a lot of Williamson County plates during the day, and that's a lot where our congestion comes from. Once the Nolensville Road widening is done, once TDOT completes that, that's going to be 5 lanes wide. That's going to give drivers a more efficient, more direct route into the city. They're not going to have to cut through. So if we start with this program on Holt, with the program on Bradford Hills Drive, we're already going to be changing behavior before the widening is completed. So that
True.
should pull some congestion away, especially with Redmond as well. Bryce, which is connected to, which eventually connects to Bradford Hills Drive, which people use as a cut through, that was number 35 on the list last year. And they do the top 25 every year. So in theory, that should drop down to 10 this year. And in the event there were no applications where streets have a higher volume, there's a very good chance that Bryce is going to get a traffic calming program as well. And those programs, the ones that are applied for, residents who live on the street have to vote for approval. So Bradford Hills Drive residents voted for approval, and residents on Bryce have been asking for it. They will have a chance to see a solution and vote on it if that application is chosen this year, and there's a good chance for that. In addition, once we finally get the solution and the land acquisition piece for Banbury Station, Mount Pisgah, and Edmondson Pike, that intersection, that will also help us change behavior with people, because it'll be another stop for these out of county. They'll probably stick to Nolensville Road. So we're piecing all these things together, which should pull a lot of this out of county traffic away from our areas. And even if it's 10 to 20%, we'll see a legitimate drop in congestion. And with the transit referendum coming up, the intelligent lighting that would be implemented in that plan would save 10% drive time county-wide. So we could see a lot of efficiencies coming up in the next couple of years if all these things take place.
Good.
Yeah,
So-
that's great. Hey, Mike, Kelly Cubberly again. I just want to say, I have been home a lot since 2020, 2021, and seen a really dramatic increase in the construction traffic. And I do believe that, the workers that are widening Nolensville Pike, they're filling up their dump trucks all day long, all day. And from 8 o'clock, it is business hours. It's 8 to 4, it's 8 to 5. But what I have noticed, there's just been a very large uptick in the past, like 2 years in particular. These dump trucks are running they've got to be running from Nolensville to Edmondson and back and forth, because obviously there's the big development to the north at Mount Pisgah off of Edmondson. I mean, it's just, I really thought that we would talk a little bit more about the amount of construction traffic that is just cutting through, and they're driving, at least 40 miles an hour during the day, 40, 45, 50 miles I mean, just full speed ahead from Nolensville to Edmondson with heavy, heavy loads of rocks and everything else. And, Sean or other people on Holt Road, chime in with me, because it just seems like there's a lot.
Totally agree, Kelly, with everything you said. And Mike, I think you've heard this from both me and Dan Covington, but we've also noticed a big increase in tractor trailers using Holt Road. So I don't know if there's any leeway or possibility of adding some kind of signage, Jeff, to halt commercial, like 18-wheeler, big 18-wheelers. But yeah, Kelly's absolutely right. There's huge amount of increase in large dump trucks, large you know, commercial type trucks, and they're always speeding. So I don't know what, if any, measures can be taken.
I
along
will
those-
talk to, I don't know if I can limit the number of dump trucks that go through, but I can definitely talk to their foreman and let them know that speeding has taken place and that we are going to have targeted enforcement, and they will be they will be targeted.
Yeah.
They've actually, the foreman's been very receptive and very responsive to me, so I can let him know about that. I don't know if I can do anything about the number of dump trucks. I can tell you the work on Edmondson Pike, having two developments going in at the same time, those passed years ago, and I'm not going to pass, I'm not going to approve any development that's going to be working at the same time before there's infrastructure. So
Thank you.
after we get through this, we're not going to be going through that headache again, especially where there's not infrastructure there to handle it. So the fact that there's two projects going at once, it makes me want to punch myself in the face, but it's what we have, and we're working through it.
Mike, what about the end of Holt Road at Nolensville Road? I've heard there's going to be a older not assisted living, but a 55 and up subdivision put down there.
That is accurate. Yeah, they are in the
Yes.
planning stages of that. That was passed. Sean, I know you were involved in those community meetings. That was passed 3 weeks
was.
ago.
Yes, it was initially passed 3 years ago, but then they did a re-application and reread and passed it last year,
Okay.
just before you took over.
Okay. And I know they are in the planning stages of that. I don't know how,
They're still doing due diligence.
Yeah, they're doing their due
I'm in
diligence on the
communication
project.
with them. Yes.
Yes, so the last update I got from them was 2 months ago, and as due diligence was actually the word they used. So Sean, thank you for that.
You bet.
Apartments going in on the other side?
There's nothing that I know of right now.
Okay.
Nothing that I've been approached about. I know there was something passed back in 2012.
Yep.
But I don't know if there's any, I don't know where that's at. I haven't heard anything about that.
There are people actively looking to buy properties right now on that corner. I know because they touched base with me, but and another person I see that's on this call, but nothing firm yet. I know we're getting off topic here, but yes, but it's a good point. I mean, to I think what your point was is that there are developments that are about to happen at the end of Holt Road that will add additional capacity in the next several years. So the needs for the things that we're talking about right now will only increase.
I will say I am very, very confident that once Nolensville is done in the next year, year and a half, I feel very confident that's going to relieve a lot of pressure on what we're feeling now, in addition to the other adjustments we're making.
I think so too. My fingers are crossed. You're right, Mike. So I think so too. Well, the only other thing I would add would be to Captain Jones, and that is if I get pulled over, is it okay if I use your name and let him know that we talked?
No comment, Mr. Doyle.
I do want to thank Captain Jones. I've put a few requests into Sergeant Gomez at the Midtown Hills for additional traffic resources out here, and I've seen quite a bit of patrolling, and I've seen I got a call. I was out of town last weekend, but I got a call that you guys were stationed out at Williams Grove doing some traffic control. So I want to thank you for that increased visibility and that increased effort in our area. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. It's
Thank
our
you.
pleasure.
Yes.
Our pleasure.
So Mr. Hammond, what are next steps? What does this look like? When do we have another meeting? What does this look like?
Well, typically we would leave this meeting and we would do a little more detailed engineering plan. I mean, there's really not that much more to do when it's just these feedback signs like this. And then we would put it out to a vote. We don't need that in this case. As I mentioned, the budget is there, and because this is going through this different process, we've typically not been balloting these. The feedback signs are not something we typically vote on anyway. And so I think if we're in consensus on the best use of these funds, limited as they may be, to implement some of these signs, we can go ahead and get started with the little more detail that we need to provide back to NDOT and get these ordered and work on the installation. I can't tell you a time frame for that because I don't know right now the backlog on those signs and all those types of details. I would think it's probably quicker than our typical traffic calming projects, which have a much longer backlog on the contractors' work backlog and so forth. So anyway, but we can go ahead and get started on that very soon if there's consensus here with this group that this looks like the best approach.
Does anybody have any concerns with what we discussed this evening?
It's a no from me, Sean.
No concerns or
No,
no?
no,
Go?
yeah, no concerns. Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
No
I thought Sean,
concerns.
really liked it.
I'll let you interpret it. It's just a no. Yeah. No concerns.
And Sean's neighbor across the street, Eugenia Wright, I've been here over 40 years and I've seen it all. So no concerns.
How you doing, Miss Wright? It's good to see you.
You too. Good to see you too.
No concerns on my end either. And I just want to say, Mike, you are doing a spectacular job.
I second that completely.
Thank you.
It's been a breath of fresh air, Mike, considering what we've had in the past. I cannot thank you enough.
Oh, thank you very much.
Unbelievably
Yes.
You're an excellent communicator, and that's all that people in your district ask for most of the time.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. It's absolutely my pleasure.
That said, I'll expect some favors here soon. But anyway, no.
Sean, I was starting to think that you were one of those street racers asking for a free reign to do what you wanted.
Right. No, that sounds about right. Maybe 40 years ago, but no, it's not me. I want to throw one last thing in there that is Holt Road related, Mike, but while we have Jeff on here, and that is, I saw in one of the initial slides that Holt is still classified as a collector. And I know I kind of petitioned you last year when we had the big snow to have Holt Road reclassified as a primary when it comes to snow removal and stuff. I'm just thinking ahead. So
yeah, no, I contacted NDOT on that, and they are looking into it. So I told them that it was a major need in the area, and they were very receptive to that. I've also, and this is not a promise. I just want to let you know that we're looking at the intersection of Holt Road and Edmondson Pike as well, because there's a lot of congestion there.
Yep.
I've had discussions with the mayor on that, and also the director of NDOT, and that's something we're going to be studying to see what can we do there to ease congestion in that area as well, along with these traffic calming projects and the other efforts we're putting into the district.
Good deal.
This is also, and this goes to Captain Jones, and I know earlier in the call we talked about police resources. When and many of you are getting my updates via email, but when I took office, we were approximately 160 officers short, give or take, of a full force. And the county's been that way for quite a while. Captain Jones, do you know how long we've been? Because we've been considerably short for, what is it, a decade now in regard to?
I don't know the specifics, but it's been quite a while. What we've had the challenges of staffing. Yes, sir.
And I will say, Chief Drake and Mayor O'Connell have been looking at recruitment efforts and very aggressive about this. And at the end of this fiscal year, we are on track to have a fully staffed force. And there's a new precinct being built in the southeast. And the council, we fully funded the MNPD and we fully funded the positions for that new precinct as well. So we should be seeing, so the police will have the resources they need in the coming months to really get back up to full strength. And that'll be the first time in, I think a decade. Don't take that as gospel. It's been a while, but the mayor and the chief have been very, very aggressive towards that to fix that problem. And the council has backed them on that.
Good news.
And I want to thank you for your support, Councilman. It means a lot.
Oh, 100%. Thank you for everything you do. Again, you guys, You and your team, Captain Jones, have been very responsive with the district, and we really appreciate the extra patrols and the extra traffic help. So it's very much appreciated.
Agreed.
Well, that's great, and thank you all for the team effort and for all of you for taking your time out to join us here tonight and talk about this. We really appreciate it. We think these make for the most effective projects, the most effective meetings. We get such a great turnout and your willingness to share your insights. Thank you very much. As we close here, I will just put up some contact information. If you do think of anything else that you didn't tell us or think we should know about, feel free to shoot us an email. That's me. I'm Jeff, the one in green below, Jeff Hammond at birchtransportation.com. There's also an NDOT website address, ndottrafficcalming@nashville.gov. It's generic because there's several of the staff members who have access to that and look at that on a daily basis. Feel free to reach out to either or both of those. Let us know your thoughts if we can help you further. The only other thing I would show is if you're interested in getting more information on traffic calming, feel free to visit this site. And as I mentioned, there's also a participatory budget website. I don't have a link to that, but I'm certain you can find that at nashville.gov. With that, I will bid you a very good evening. Thank you again for your time and your interest in this and for making our streets safer. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. And remember, if you have updates, if you hear street racing, if you hear anything that I can pass along to the MNPD, it will please pass it along. Mike.Cortez@nashville.gov, because that will help us focus our efforts into combating it.
Will do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you, everybody.